Hello, this is our group presentation on television sports stations and how much time do they devote to each gender. This is presented by Amber, Jordan, Gianna, and Roger.
To start, I want to go over some main topics that we'll see. Title IX came into place in 1972, and this banned sex discrimination in schools, which included sports. And then framing theory, which frames the way we see things, and in this case, it's women in sports. So publication pre and post Title IX found increased awareness and reporting of women's sports, but men's sports were still reported in a superior manner. The framing theory I just mentioned before suggests that practices for representing gender in the media have become standardized and they reinforce our gender stereotypes. This can start in college with the amount of coverage placed on women's sports. But there's hope. Student journalists that belong to the generation that grew up with Title IX might be more likely than professional media practitioners to cover athletes in a way that results in gender equity. On this slide, we have some data you can look at, and the importance is significant when you consider that the sports industry has traditionally been male-defined and male-controlled. Title IX gives women equal access to sports participation at schools, but it doesn't guarantee that the participants will be recognized by media outlets, either at their university or beyond. And this is important to change this view so that we can change the way we view women in general.
This article covered ESPN SportsCenter and how they frame women's athletics. The researchers in this article had 3 research questions that they wanted to find out. Those are listed on the screen right here. The researchers recorded SportsCenter every night for 4 weeks and 2 days. The 2 days were to incorporate the Women in Sports Weekend segment. Researchers chose this time period because women's basketball and women's soccer were in the regular season, but also during this time, men's hockey and men's basketball were in their championships. Over the course of the study, they had 30 broadcast dates with a total of 807 stories appearing on the hour-long program. Unit of analysis was story, and some coding included broadcast date, sport involved, individual or team competition, story placement, and the sex of the participants and sex of news anchors. Results showed that throughout the 30 days, 778 stories were about men, where 16 were about women. 16 stories included 9 French Open tennis tournaments, 3 golf, 2 basketball highlights, 1 college softball, and 1 track. 3 stories covered were team sports, where the rest were individual sports. The length of male and female stories were 65.6 seconds for males and 38.10 seconds for females. 5 stories contained 6 comments from women, equaling a total of 1 minute and 28 seconds of airtime, but only 1 story included sound from a female source. All 16 stories included some video, but no female story involved a reporter, whereas 83 men's stories contained reporters. Only 1 of the 16 women's stories met the requirements as hard news, where 71 men's stories met this definition. In conclusion, researchers found that stories about women appear later in the show and are of secondary importance at SportsCenter because fewer ESPN resources were allocated to coverage of women's events. The second article discusses framing theory in televised golf announcing. These researchers had several hypotheses that they wanted to discover. A few being sportscasters will be significantly more likely to comment on the strength of male golfers than the strength of female golfers. Sportscasters will describe the personality and physicality of male and female athletes in significantly different ways, and the gendering of professional golf commentary will differ from the prevalent gendering of other sports. Researchers recorded a total of 243.5 hours of live golf coverage, which included the first 6 tournaments on the 2003 PGA schedule, the first 13 televised tournaments from the LPGA schedule, and the nationally televised coverage of 4 Grand Slam tournaments for each tour. Dialogue was recorded from 8 networks: ABC, NBC, CBS, TNT, ESPN, ESPN2, USA, and the Golf Channel, where men's coverage was a total of 114 hours and women's coverage was a total of 129.5 hours. Coders recorded the gender of the athlete, the nationality of the athlete, gender of the announcer, nationality of the announcer, and a few more. Researchers decided to use a 12-item taxonomy, which appeared to be the most logical choice for implementation of this coding scheme. They recorded success and failure descriptors, personality and physicality descriptors, and they also added 9 additional categories, including athletic descriptors. A total of 34,881 descriptors were found within that time frame. Male golfers accounted for 45.6% of the database, where female golfers composed of 54.4% of the database. Descriptors used by male sportscasters accounted for an overwhelming 87.1%, and female sportscasters accounted for 12.7%. 15 significant differences were found in the ways male and female golfers were described. Hypothesis 1 was not proven, as female golfers received the bulk of strength comments. Hypothesis 2 had 9 significant differences, confirming that hypothesis. And hypothesis 3 was confirmed, as golf did appear to provide a unique venue for sport commentary. In conclusion, 34 significant tests were run with 24 significant differences detected, meaning that 70% of all categories tested showed gender differences. And researchers found this to be because golf was an individual sport compared to other sports like basketball.
The central aim of my first study is to present the findings of the most recent iteration of a 25-year longitudinal study, highlighting continuities and differences in the quantity and quality of coverage of women's and men's sports over time. The research shows the majority of coverage is given to the big three in men's pro and college football, basketball, and baseball. The methods include 3 two-week blocks on 4 major sports stations recorded for the analysis. The networks were CBS, NBC, ABC, and ESPN from the dates March 16th to 29th, July 13th to 26th, and November 9th to 23rd. The following stage is qualitative analysis of the footage performed, and previous iterations of the study are drawn to compare data. The findings indicate that the coverage of women's sports remains substantially lower than its coverage 10, 15, 20, and even 25 years ago, with 5% in 2014 compared to 8.7% in 1999. Statistics of the total sports coverage of local network affiliates and SportsCenter had total airtime dedicated to women's sports at 2.3% as of 2014, with basketball being the most commonly featured women's sport. Researchers conclude that persistent conservative gender ideologies, structured inequities, and sex segregation continue to limit girls' challenge to boys' hegemony in sports. My second article, researchers examined a case study of a prominent athletic brand, Nike, and their advertising to examine the ways they expand or reify stereotypes of gender in sport. The methods include a qualitative content analysis of 131 commercials released by Nike in the past decade, exploring whether their stated goals of being a socially progressive company extended to diverse and inclusive portrayals of gender in their commercials. Of the 131 ads used for the analysis, data shows 675 total athletes were portrayed, with 65% being male, 35% female, and a total of 3 non-binary athletes. 47% of the commercials did not include female athletes. 67% of athletes portrayed were non-white, indicating racial diversity outweighs gender equality in Nike's business model. 92% of the athletes portrayed were competing in gender-typical sports, while only 8% of athletes were portrayed in non-stereotypical roles. The researchers concluded that inclusion and acceptance of non-traditional athletes in mainstream media is yet to be achieved, as Nike appears more concerned with racial diversity and activism campaigns as opposed to their commitment to gender equality, which is not evident in their commercials.
And then next we have the women sportscasters. This study was done with interviews with 26 women. The study consisted of a thematic analysis for comparisons, looking at the patterns and similarities that the women had in their responses. The 4 obstacles women are facing was appearance, which was the main priority for men, including the women's age. There is the credibility, where women were tested to prove their credibility and knowledge on the topic of sports. The inequitable treatment, where women experience derogatory comments, sexual harassment, and physical harassment. Then there's the oppression that women experience, where they were sexualized rather than seen in a professional setting, and most of them were sidelined reporters and even hosts for short periods of segments. Then we have the progression, where the women where we see an increase in women's roles. More women we see are in management, and if we have more women participate in a younger age in sports, then that removes the men reliability. And then here are our references, and we're all set.